I will take I take your cue to think about something else, taking us a little bit out of the building and also out of the neighborhood into the city. If we want to think it as an abstraction, but also as this sum of incredible social, political, economic, ethnological relationship, right? And the idea of I was thinking in something that for me was critical when I was thinking about this, although I hustle a lot with Lefebvre, the production of space, because, you know, in a way, when he wrote in the 70s and you know, his critique of everyday life, but also the production of space, he wouldn't consider that certain attitudes and certain aspect that he links to urbanness will occur in other places, let's say, outside of what he called, you know, the cities in France, no, the peasantry and countryside, or in his view, also like spaces that were sort of colonized. But then there is this idea of the notion of difference, which somehow apply to some of the things that you were saying, or I think that I can read in some of the work that you have done in the past, Blanca, or in some of the ideas of recycling the city in the views of recetas urbanas, for instance, no, Raúl? Mm-hmm. This idea that, in a way, we are our own urbanness, our own dwelling in this space that we call city isn't necessary and only condition for change. And that, in a way, there is a need to reform and to appropriate the space, to consume it to a fashion that will transform the way we live it as we were, let's say, new subject of a new environment, right? Like, but how much space we do have? No, we see it with demonstrations. These are occupation of space, temporary occupations, right? There are ways in which our imprint in a city is clear and is palatable. But there are others where I have the impression that they are mainly so when are temporary. But I wonder how we can do an everlasting impact on the city fabric, right? How can we really intervene as citizens, an urban environment?
Well,
oh. You want to start, Blanca, and then go with Lily and Raúl?
Well, as far as I mean, we can engage with history with participatory processes, but sometimes these participatory processes are not real. I mean, they listen to the people, but it's difficult that this becomes translate into the city, in the tissue of city. But also sometimes, as Santiago Cirujeta did and Recetas Urbanas and Alice did before, with finding these illegal spaces or frames that you can produce some parts of the city, but you are all the time working these illegal voids that maybe can be non-legal at some point after you do something, but maybe they can be legal, no? But it's difficult. I think it's very difficult because the city is very gestionada, managed through the law and through the city councils in a way. So it's very difficult that we can take some decisions. Or yeah, Lily.
I know it was just reminding me of what again last night at the neighborhood forum meeting there, our local MP Karen Buck was talking about the sort of the necessities of infrastructures in neighborhoods in the city to enable these like people to intervene in the fabric of the city, because you can have like a bureaucracy surrounding a set of policies and maybe a set of emails that are sent out, but until people really connect one-to-one and share information, share knowledge, be part of a process together, which takes time and constant and the sense of like maintenance on a daily basis. Without those kind of infrastructures, how can thinking about kind of longer term processes of affecting change, you can have maybe like short-term injections of alternative ways of thinking or organizing, but how can those be maintained? Which becomes a wider question about structures and infrastructures which then can impact on who has a power, like who can speak back to the power, say, of at the sort of other levels of policy making in governance. But those kind of relays or relations between the different levels, if you like, of governance and participation in, as like active citizens in a process of kind of democratic.
Yeah, and as you said, is all the language is full of technicalities, no, and laws that is very difficult to go inside these things. As I said, everybody has an experience and knowledge, no, of space, cities, and their places, but the language that is using to build to construct all these tissues non-accessible.
Yeah, and so which kind of relates to like who has a voice and at what point, thinking about timeframes also for in relation to the neighborhood around the showroom. There've been kind of successive redevelopment plans underway, and of necessity kind of it's a good at least 10 years worth of like updated and revised negotiations around the link between the council and different developers, with kind of necessities and relationships at stake for how, for example, the housing is redeveloped, which are one of the most densely populated kind of social housing wards in London and in the country, and one of the most diverse, Karen Buck was saying last night, one of the most diverse localities in the country, if not globally, in terms of the sheer number of nationalities that are living close together, but also have the kind of density of that in terms of some families may be sharing a 1-bedroom flat with 6 members of the family there close together, and what scope is for them to have a voice or a say in the conversations that are happening at a much larger timescale, say like 5 years worth of planning between, of necessity, the kind of bureaucracies of the council in relation to the developers and wider kind of processes. So yeah, what are the possibilities for any kind of feedback loop for people who are living very locally to have a voice in how their neighborhood is shaped? So sort of thinking of timescales as well as spatial arrangement.